We're very fortunate to have a handful of collections that represent a very special group of people, and Gene Hepting is one of them. Photography was not his vocation, it became his hobby. And he had other interests that he pursued, and he contributed to well. He was a real class professional, no, semi-pro bicycle racer. This is shortly after the turn of the century. And he shows up in organizations like the Capital City Wheelmen running these wonderful races. And in fact, he shows up in a bunch of pictures, as do his friends, because he's taking a camera with him and he's shooting pictures of the races and the people around and the spots they go to. And obviously, it's a little bit of an infectious bug. He gets interested in what he can do with photography. So he has a terrible accident and he hurts himself and he ruins his bike. We have his bike in collections. The wheels are offset about 9 inches. He had a major incident with an oak tree and the oak tree won. But he grew up from that and took up photography as an interest. And like a small group of other people, he took it very systematically. He decided to document Sacramento. He went up and down the streets and up and down the numbered streets and lettered streets. He went up and down and photographed every building. He not only did that in the 1920s, he did it in the 1950s, just before he died. We have about 9,000 negatives of his and many of his prints, but we have about 9,000 negatives that he shot. And this picture behind me is a very good example of that. This is a picture of a building over about 8th and H Streets, roughly. Gone now, but that's what he documents. He documents things that were there at a certain time and have gone away. He is an amateur, but he's got a pretty good lens and he's got a good sense of what he's shooting. And he was there to catch very interesting subjects. For example, during World War II, he went through what was then called Japantown, and he photographed Japanese families loading their possessions up, selling their stores, selling their businesses, and going away to camp. Because he thought, this is important, this should be captured. But he is like a small group of guys who spent their whole life doing it, and it was almost like a religion to them. And they often talked with each other. They traded pictures sometimes. And we're fortunate. We have 2 or 3 of them. But he's certainly one of the most interesting. And he took every one of these pictures usually and put them in albums and wrote long, lengthy descriptions of what he remembered about the history of the building or the place or the event that took place there. Sometimes he's not exactly right, but it's what he remembers. And many times it's all that anybody remembered. So he's a real asset to Sacramento.